So getting back to how Mouse ruined comics.
Okay.
All right, 30 seconds. Your 30 seconds are up. No more boomer music.
Ladies and gentlemen, kids of all ages, it is, well, actually, you might not want to have your kids watch. We occasionally swear here. Kids 12 and up. Anyway, it's the Mattriarchy. I'm your host, Matt Rhys. And it is, I tell you what, guys, outside, it is like 100 degrees here in Nebraska. I got home from work early. It's been a rough day. I said, honey, I'm gonna take my computer. I'm gonna go read some awful Russian comics in the backyard in the shade. And she says, okay, that sounds great. And I get back there and I get down in the chair and I just pass out. I woke up drenched in sweat. It was miserable. But I did read those comics, so that's fun. So we are here to talk about. Twitless had this crazy idea. I'll let him talk about it a little bit here, guys. But he says, what do you guys think about Russian propaganda? And I said, what? and Metal said, yes, please.
Yeah, I don't even think I got finished saying the sentence.
That's exactly right. So today we are going to be going through and talking about some poorly translated AI drawn Russian propaganda comics that are apparently being made today. So, if you ever watched Ruskies as a child, this will ruin your memories. So.
All right. So, thanks to everybody and to chat for joining in. While we wait for people, I think we started early today, so everyone's waiting, probably going, "Oh my gosh!"
We're only 8 minutes late. We started early.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, we started early late. So I'll tell. I guess I can give a little bit of background into kind of what got me onto this, and kind of why I think this is a really good, not only a good discussion, but I think a necessary one, and one that no matter what side of things you may fall on, is still useful. So I'm part of a listserv for academic stuff, and an article came across, and it basically said, "Hey, check this out," and and it was a BBC article, and the BBC article. So we might as well just pull this up. Give me a second.
I got it on the screen share here. I'm just.
Well, I'll share it so I can, because I might read parts of it.
By the way, while you're doing this, if there are any Russians in the comments, we would love to hear from you. Leave a bear emoji in the comments.
Any actual Russians by my co-worker, co-creator at Ideal Comics, Barry Tetz. Half his family is Russian, of Russian descent. They're on the Eastern Seaboard.
Come on, we'd love to hear from you.
So, but he's not. He's probably getting ready for work, so he probably won't be tuning in. He might check us on replay. But he is in fact part Russian. But that's what I know.
I'm told I have a little Russian somewhere on my mother's side.
Yeah, and my wife's family, they're my wife's father's mother's family specifically. They are German Kleinsaucers, but they were East Germans that moved into Ukraine before coming to America. So there you go.
Sorry, you said Ukrainian ancestry?
Yeah. My wife's father's mother's family are Germans by way of Ukraine.
Interesting. Okay. Well, this I didn't know I'd walked into that with this potential. This stream here.
Nice. I was rushing around today doing a lot of errands.
I did a little of that too.
Well, I have no blood in this situation, but so I got the screen share up for you, and this is kind of what started things off. And hey, John De La Rose saying hey. He says he should save the stream. He's pulling a good old Testify, which if he were here, he'd be screaming at me to go jump off a bridge.
Well, there are bridges near you.
Yeah, that's true.
But-
Actually, what Testify would say, to be in honor of today's stream, is he'd say, go join either side of this conflict, probably. So this article came across my feed, and in the article from the BBC said how the Kremlin uses comics to glorify its war in Ukraine. So the whole thing is basically this BBC takedown of Russian propaganda. And so I'm not going to read the entire thing, but I
want to point out, just for the record,
Sure.
how ridiculous the shock and faux awe in this idea is, since every country since the invention of comics has been using comics as propaganda whenever they're in a war.
Or how about even before, even setting comics aside, it's like, oh, a nation is at war, and they actually try to send propaganda and messaging, like, oh my gosh, what a shock that a nation would do such a thing.
Definitionally speaking, war is glory.
Yeah.
So anyway, surprising nobody, the Russians also propagandize, like every nation ever.
Yeah, exactly.
So they say, oh, war-themed comics are being used to glorify the war. Seems the Kremlin is taking steps to ensure that, and of course they drop a poll with no link and no backup. So they say that there's, that the war in Ukraine was, not popular with youngsters, and the Kremlin's trying to combat that. Again, no data on that, whether it's true or not. So and then kind of introduced us to some of these comics. Let's see here. A couple of things I wanted to highlight from this article in particular, and this is why I wanted to do this stream, was that the BBC article was really, really heavy-handed. Hey, Star Storyteller. The BBC article was basically propaganda on its own. It was just propaganda about the Russian propaganda. And so, because I started hearing about these comics, and here's what was interesting. The BBC article did its best to not link to anything. It didn't link to sources like at all. And the bare minimum it did is it would pull images from these comics, and then you'd see this little thing in the I don't know if you can notice it in the bottom right hand corner that I highlighted there. And that was the only clue. Maybe I can zoom in on it. This little thing right here where it says rybar.ru. That's the only clue of basically where to actually find the darn thing. There's no links to them. The article mentions how they were translated into English, but then didn't say where you could read them. Right. It told us, the article tells us, for example, in Oleg Roy's books, NATO generals are portrayed as evil and scheming. And of course, that made me kind of laugh a little bit. Because it was like, oh no, NATO has never schemed before.
Or the fact that, or take this way, the fact that an international organization that only exists to
scheme against Russia,
exactly, is somehow looked at unfavorably by the Russians. Right? And once again, I'm not saying like.
Not taking sides, but just saying that it's just a funny.
Well, I definitely have a side, but that's not what I'm trying to get at. The point I'm trying to get at is like, duh.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
It's like, yes, obviously that's the case.
So anyway, so like I said, the interesting thing to me was, without getting into the sides of the issue, was the fact that, this article was framed kind of as a piece of counter propaganda, while saying, oh, the Russian propaganda is, look at how they portray NATO. Oh, how dare they? And it's like, Jim Tuner says, you people are all communists. What have I walked into? Don't worry. We're gonna put some Russian comics on blast here in a second. But I got to put the BBC on blast first, because here's the interesting thing.
Well, and ironically, the BBC are also communists.
Right.
So,
well, I also would be surprised if the BBC is heavily controlled by the UK government.
They're 100%. They're actually a branch of the UK government. Like they don't. Yeah. They are a branch of the UK government. They are the state.
The BBC is funded by your TV licenses, tax funded
So they probably have a
channel.
whole bunch of people over them telling them exactly what they can and can't do.
Oh,
Welcome.
Probably why
Yeah.
they weren't allowed to link anything back, because they didn't actually want people reading these comics.
Well, that's what got me, because I go, hey, these comics sound insane, and the article mentions how they've been translated into English. These
And I'm
comics
gonna
were
jump-
translated
I'm gonna-
into.
I gotta drop a spoiler alert on the whole thing. It's like
Oh,
if they're concerned, just a little spoiler alert. If the BBC bosses are concerned that by reading these comics you'll be swayed over to the Russian way of looking at things, you were
They're-
mistaken.
Well, I was going to say that doesn't speak very well at your side. If you're afraid that these comics were really going to change, really like, oh my gosh. I will say anyway. Before we get into that though, so this sentence right here, so this article tells me that I could read these things, but then gave me it just said, hey, trust me, bro, as I'm going to tell you what's in them. And I'm like, are you serious? This is like, just again, it's one of the chalk up reason 1000 of like why I hate journalists. But it's like, no, trust me, journalists. Don't use your own brain. Don't use your own reading comprehension. Don't read this on your own. Just trust how I tell you about kind of what's going on here. And that instantly told me everything I needed to know in terms of I have to read these myself.
Yeah.
So
Can you believe that they actually charge people TV licenses to pay for this stuff?
Don't get me started on the TV license.
So this is one of those things where I need to again admit to the world that I did study journalism my freshman year.
Yeah.
So yeah, just so you know, I am covered in shame. Let's move on.
That's okay.
Yeah.
So here's the interesting thing. So I did some digging, and I was able to not only find these comics, I found a bunch of other stuff that I'm going to share with you today. And then we're going to take a look at, hey, Fizz, we're going to take a look at some of these comics, the ones that we're directly looking at here today.
Okay, Star, I know you just tuned in, but you got to stage for the whole show. I'm just telling you, this will be the perfect thing for you.
Okay, so let's start with the tamer stuff, okay, that are actually drawn by human beings. So, in fact, that little piece about how NATO is all scheming and stuff, I found that exact comic because I wanted to see it for myself. So we've got.
Can we talk about, by the way, did you ever find anything on it? I don't know. The fact that of everything I've seen so far, that one shot of the NATO people is the only hand-drawn art I've seen so far.
Okay, so that's what I was going to say. So these comics here, there's an entire series of them, and these are all hand-drawn. These are more traditional kind of comics you might see like back in the Golden Age, where it's like, hey, here's a story of something that looks kind of like we traced it from photos a little bit.
Also very clearly traced.
So we traced some, well, not all traced, but the figure is definitely traced. So we definitely traced some stuff, and it's basically stories about like, real life soldiers to celebrate their heroism. So very, very typical kind of comic. Hey, Fizz, we're talking about Russian propaganda comics. You're going to want to stay for this one. It's got some fascinating material. So I'll zoom in a little bit here so you can take a look at kind of a little bit of it in depth. We have a highlight. Again, these comics were not translated into English. So if you are familiar with Russian, you can feel free to chime in chat and let us know what we're missing here. But you can kind of get the gist just by looking at the pictures, which is one of the magic aspects of comics. So we've got, our guy who's clearly telling his own story. He clearly works for the Russian Air Force. And then here are sneaky NATO people. They're scheming. And then here's him and his, real-time action that he is engaged in. And so, like I said, there's quite a few of those. So if I go back here, hopefully this won't take forever to load. It is a Russian website, so it's not the fastest thing. But there's actually, I just wanted to kind of share that there
Our internet
are.
still runs on the computers they designed Tetris on.
Yeah. Well, it's either that or it's like, hey,
I forgot about that.
Internet traffic is being heavily deprioritized if you're clicking on Russian sites. So, like, it wouldn't surprise me. Here we go. So you'll notice that there's actually quite a few of these. A lot of them look the same as to what I've already shared with you. So once you've seen one, you've kind of seen them all. in terms of just looking at them, but there are quite a few of them. And again, if you
So
read
are
Russian,
these true stories then? Because they appear.
Yeah.
I'm assuming
they
these
are
all
they
real
are they are
people?
presented
In
as
this
true
series,
stories.
in
Yeah.
this series, there are true
Yes.
stories.
Yeah.
In the other series, there are
Right.
some that are true stories, and some that are fictionalized stories, and some that are
Mixtures of
inspired
both.
by
Yeah.
real events.
All right, so I translated this page. This is Knowledge Hero. As part of the Knowledge Hero project, professional artists created 22 graphic short stories devoted to the exploits of participants in a special military operation. We invite you to meet them. Hope that you will be inspired by the nobility and dedication of our compatriots. So that's kind of, again, Google machine translation of kind of what is being presented here. But so not all of it is being like just AI generated or whatever have you. There is some honest to goodness, just, genuine artistry kind of going on here. So I wanted to share that initial one for you. That's one of the ones from the BBC article. Like I said, that's the image of the scheming NATO generals came directly from that one. So I was like, check, I saw that. Jim Tuner says most Soviet history is a mix of truth and things that are not true, especially military stories.
Yeah.
I would add to that a lot of that is we could probably say the same thing about our own history.
Well, also Russia isn't the
presentation.
Soviets anymore.
Yeah. Well, the Russia is not Soviets anymore. Technically, we are, but they aren't.
Mm-mm.
But they're if you want to really get into break it down, the Russians' current operating government is a bureaucratic fascist government, with more emphasis on the central government control and less emphasis on the bureaucratic aspect
Belarus
of it.
is still kind of close to how it used to be.
Whereas America is more emphasis on the bureaucracy than on the central government control. So
I wanted to point out, Star says that some of these look a bit soulless. I got some stuff that looks a little better, so I'm going to share that with you in just a second. But before we get too far, I wanted to mention a couple of things, which is regardless of where you fall on, because all these comics do deal with the elephant in the room, the event that's happening right now, the Russian war with Ukraine. And regardless of where you fall on that, and I didn't really want to get the stream into that territory because that's a whole can of worms, right? And I want to focus on the comics. I think it's fair to say just a couple of things. And the first thing is that I hope for a swift and peaceful end to the conflict so that fewer people die. I think that's a fair thing to say. So I'm going to put that out there. And the second thing I want to say is this, is that regardless of where you fall on the issue, this is a necessary thing to read for a couple of reasons. First, it's important to read what the opposition says on things so that you can see what their messages are. You'll learn a lot through that process. I learned a bit. And finally, I would add to that is the fact that reading propaganda specifically is important, because if you read propaganda from your opposition, you will very quickly be able to identify how it functions as propaganda, and that'll make it easier for you to spot the functions of propaganda coming from sources closer to home, where it's more easily slips past your sensors.
Here.
Because America, very good, I would argue, very often using propaganda, but it's harder for us to notice it, especially if it's something that we may agree with.
What do you mean? It's all of Hollywood.
Yeah, fair. But I just said that's something that during COVID, for example, we was heavy propaganda during COVID, and people would just go, "No, that's just the right thing to say." And so it's like I said, I think it's really important to study something as even outlandish as Russian propaganda, if for no other reason than it's going to make it easier for us to spot future propaganda that's going to be, shown to us and that we might be more tempted to swallow.
Also, I'm going to add, because when I was in college, I was in a writing or literature, I guess it was, class, and there was a part where the teacher brought out the concept of propaganda and broke it down into 13 individual little strategies, defining it not as this kind of, ever so specific government, unfair kind of thing, but as a strategies used simply to convince something of someone in conversation, whether that be in a casual one-on-one between you and someone else, or the way a company markets themselves to you over the internet. Whether it is coming from government or the military, or whether you're watching a commercial for a candidate, who's
So
running.
wait. So what you're describing there, and I do agree with this, is basically what you're explaining is that propaganda is simply a function of rhetoric.
Right.
Rhetoric is simply the art of persuading or prompting people to respond to things in a way that you want, and that's really just
rhetoric is formalized discussion, and propaganda, by rhetorical perspective, is just the one side of the argument.
Sure.
If you're presenting one side of the argument,
propaganda has a more specific definition than that.
Well, I mean, it depends on what category you're dealing with.
I was going to say,
what you're talking about.
If I could break it down just a little more to kind of just even things out a little bit, without specific definitions attached, it's fair to say that one person's propaganda is simply another person's perspective. And that's why the best way to study propaganda, the way I see it, is again to study it as a function of rhetoric, the way that we message and converse and ultimately want to persuade, to push the messages that we believe from our own worldviews. But there are plenty of people who simply look at, for example, the Bible as just propaganda, or people who spread biblical messages as propaganda. And then, their own messages we see as propaganda, which is why, like I said, at the end of the day, this is a helpful discussion because we can see very obviously where the messaging and how it's operating in that rhetorical way. Jim Tuner says more sophistry than rhetoric.
Well, even like traditionally propaganda, the individual's opinion is only a byproduct of the goal to influence public opinion. But the public is made of many individuals, which is why you have to hit them there. But the actual goal of propaganda is the dissemination of information to sway public opinion.
Which every side who's ever wanted something out of life wants to do.
But it's a very specific part of rhetoric. It's not like you can't just broadly classify it.
Maybe not, but my point being that it can pop up in a million different areas of life, and not just the kind of we generally think of when we talk about propaganda. And I think it's just as important to understand those, that you don't get taken in the supermarket by a sign that says limit 8 per person, when they know that'll get you to buy more than they would normally would, right? So there's, I would look up the 13 types of propaganda, because there are all kinds of different variations and different things that people can do.
Well, let's take a look at, so the same guy who did the comics we just talked about, Oleg Roy, is I think he's a fairly mainstream Russian author. He's published a lot of Russian, it looks like they look like romance books to me, but he's also done a lot of children's programming. This is where things got interesting for me, because this is again looking behind the Iron Curtain as well.
Okay, so here's a question: this Oleg Roy cat, is he like a James Patterson fellow, where he's like the head of an organization who does all of this stuff and puts his name on it, or is it just one super prolific guy in his basement?
He struck me as a guy who was doing a little bit of. This is basically Russian Ripperverse. He struck me as like Russian Eric July, except more connected in terms of like he has more products. He has there's like animation, I think, and stuff. Like there's like a Russian like TV. It was like Meow Meow. It was like for. He seems to be a multimedia guy.
That would fit with the classic trends, because especially with the older Soviet propaganda, they would just work a few artists to the bones instead of actually spreading it around.
So I don't know enough, but I do know that he's done prose, and so but this is one of his newest projects, and this project is a superhero. It's called it's just Russian superheroes, and it's kind of like a mix between the MCU and Fortnite.
I was gonna say it looks like not Fortnite. It's I was thinking Overwatch is what it reminded me of.
Yeah. It's Overwatch, Fortnite, kind of a little bit.
I was gonna ask, am I looking at? In these pictures, are some of these action figures, or is that all just CGI?
Most of them are CGI. Some of them are just drawn. But I wanted to show you. I wanted to show you a little bit of this. So we got by Brand and Oleg Roy. I don't know what Brand is. That's funny though. Brand TM. So this is their superhero initiative, because clearly the Russians need to have if they're not going to be influenced by American messaging, they need to have their own MCU. And so this is kind of like their attempt at that. But as I read through it, it is the most Russian thing ever. And let me show you a little bit of what I mean by that. So when you see some American lore dumps, right, you expect to kind of get a little bit of backstory, right? Maybe this much. This little bit here. Since time immemorial, since the youth of mankind, the legend about the heart of the world or the heart of the earth has been preserved. Ancient people considered the earth to be a living being and were sure that somewhere in its depths a heart was beating, preserving life on our planet. Through the mysterious arteries of Mother Earth flows her blood, vital energy, supplying all continents and countries with life force. And as long as the heart beats, life continues on this planet. Now, you may have thought to yourself as I read that, that's interesting, but it kind of sounded a little long-winded. And that's where I say, oh, my dear child.
You've never read a Russian novel.
This is where the Russian hits the road. So this, by the way, is simply the beginning part of the lore. If we click on one of the superheroes, let's click on our little kind of Captain America looking guy here. This is Peresvet. So this is...
You gotta roll them R's.
The screen can't even contain in one scroll the full bit of his backstory.
And it's such tiny script.
Now
So that's just his backstory. By the way, it keeps going to his superpowers and skills, and then his artifacts and his allies, and it just kept going. And it was, like I said, the most Russian thing I have ever seen. I wanted to pull up Zarya. Again, also not quite as long as the previous character, but again, can you just see like just the wall? the Berlin Wall of text.
What I'm interested in here is that this is all being written in English.
There's the Russian you can translate into English or Russian.
Right. Okay, so I guess somebody's doing a translation, because if I'm not mistaken, Russian doesn't have nearly as many articles in it as English does.
There's the Russian version.
No.
English only
they're just
has
very
great-
short. Russian uses articles all the time. You just don't notice them because they get wedged in between things.
And also, Russian is a denser language. I mean, like the language density of Russian is greater. So
Density and everything's longer.
So when you look at War and Peace in English is like this thick, and War and Peace in Russian is like this thick.
So, so that's kind of where I was going. I was wondering if it's the English translation that is naturally.
When I flip back and forth, you didn't see that much of a difference. It's still a block of text, and a pretty sizable one. But let me show you a little bit about what the superpowers are for some of these characters. We have Zarya, 18 years old, university student. She's got the whole power graph looking thing here. She has the ability of radio electronic control systems, foreign intelligence, phenomenal memory, erudition, technomancy, cybersport, telekinesis, ability to protect the future, does not need air to breathe, filthy capitalist. Zarya's brain works faster and more efficiently than that of the most outstanding geniuses on Earth. So not only did they give a lore dump for the character, they also gave a lore dump for just the amount of superpowers they have. And then before we move on too much, I did want to show that this might be my...
I maybe have misunderstood. Is this a game? Because if not, they're basically portraying it as if this is a character made.
They're marketing it that way.
Solid character.
Yeah. Okay, but let me zoom in here.
And...
This might be my favorite superpower of all time. He has the superpower and skill of border guard.
We need some of them.
What is superpower you have? I have a superpower of border control. Haha, American. Superpower no one of you have.
This guy's design just reminds me of the end from Metal Gear Solid 3.
Yeah, no, you're right. That wouldn't
right.
surprise me if that's actually intentional. But yeah, I cracked when I saw that superpower.
They should have separated superpowers and skills into two categories. It would have made
probably, but that still cracked me the hell up. So we have a couple of those characters. Who else is interesting to show off here? I will show off that we've got some super powered characters, and then because if the Americans can rip off Journey to the West with Monkey King 100 times, so can we. They just have
we're closer.
yeah,
Neighbor
yeah.
from the south.
Japan did it first. Just wanna point that
So they're
out.
like, hey, we're actually neighbors of China, so we're just gonna steal Monkey King too. So Monkey King's a part of their superhero universe. And then on top of that, because people like Power Rangers, they also have their own Voltron, but their Voltron is called Gorinich, which is I think it's Zime Gorinich, which is basically a Russian dragon legend. So the Gorinich is basically these 3 kind of transformer-looking dragon plane things.
Yeah, I know that creature.
And they
that's the 3-headed dragon in what was it?
Dungeons and Dragons.
No. There's
I know there's a dozen.
There's a Russian movie, fantasy movie.
Oh, like the one that Mr. Stein's Theater did? Yeah. Uh-huh.
No,
I think
that's
you're right.
Dungeons and Dragons is a 5-headed dragon, and that's Tiamat.
Yeah.
Gorinich is a creature in Pathfinder.
Monster Zero from
yeah.
Godzilla.
Oh, I'm not sure about Pathfinder, but I definitely know it's a thing in mythology.
So
It's also in Yu-Gi-Oh.
They took the term
recently.
Gorinich and then they made Voltron out of it. So this is all of that. But in addition to that, and this I'll just share just a couple of these real fast. They actually are creating not just a marketing campaign, which is what I initially thought it was. They have in fact created a couple of comics, and they are in the process of being released as we speak. And so this one is of I think kind of a techno kind of Iron Man kind of character. This is where you go, okay, that's drawn art. This is actually kind of, even if it's not the same as our American colored comics, I saw this and I went, oh man, I would love if I could get an English translation of this. I would, potentially enjoy having a copy.
That actually looks pretty fun.
I was like, this doesn't look half bad.
No.
This is also the most 90s thing I've ever seen.
Well, the backgrounds.
That might be why it's appealing to me.
That might be it. that might be the very reason. All right, so let me share one more. And this is our Zarya comic. So this is the chick with the doesn't need to breathe in space.
Yeah, she's.
I thought it was underwater.
No, she doesn't need air to breathe at all.
At all, yeah.
Is what it said.
Right,
so space would definitely.
She's like Freakazoid. She just drops into the internet and she's fine.
There you go.
Yeah.
So this is Zarya, and that first page there, I don't know, that art didn't look too bad to me. Right there, that first splash.
Oh man, it's pretty legit.
And so we got some other pages here, and I was like, you know what? It's a little on the rough side, but
here we go. Jim,
it's got a very
classic underwater
feel to it.
Space, same thing.
Yeah, just doesn't need air. So any of those places are fine. Now the pressure, they don't even talk about that, but I'm assuming she's tough enough to handle the pressure changes.
But so these are, and again, from a propaganda angle, you can see how these would function like that. Actually, I got one more thing to share from the Russian superhero thing that was funny. That was also the most Russian thing I've ever seen. It was the world page.
It could use some more gray tone, but it's got a very classic look to it.
Here we go. Okay.
Which I like.
So I've done a bunch of reading. Would someone like to read the general plot world of Russian superheroes for us?
In or with or without a Russian accent?
Either. I need to give my throat a break.
The plot of Russian superheroes unfolds in the relatively near future. In the period not too far ahead from our present day, scientific advancements have continued to progress, achieving significant success around many domains. I'm starting to sound like Gru from...
You're starting to sound Scottish. You got to be careful.
However, these advancements have not solved humanity's problems. Rather, they have exacerbated them. One such problem is the ongoing lack of energy, as an alternative method of production has yet to be discovered. the demand for fuels remains high, and their uneven distribution across the planet continues to be potential cause for conflict. Instead of fostering friendly relationships and seeking mutual understanding and cooperation, humanity has resulted in long-winded explanations that I am getting sick of reading. Oh,
I lost track of where you were.
it's right at the bottom of the last or the second paragraph.
You gotta
Humanity
finish
is
it.
become increasingly entangled
Privet goes
in
within lumping.
contradictions. Oh, oh gosh, the
At
primary
least somebody knows how to
investigator-
say hello in Russian.
The primary instigators of these constant clashes are often largely property owners and the ruling elites of individual countries, those whose agencies prioritize their own interests over those of the people. Gosh darn it, this is the reality.
Is that true? But is that not the most Russian way of phrasing it? The primary
Yes.
instigators are those large property owners.
Yeah, it's great. Like Vladimir Putin. So, yeah. This is. I got to go back to the chat. We got some fire here. Colin showed up and says, "What is this?" Jim Tudor says, "This is a communism and pro-Russian teaching."
Here we go.
Yet.
Jig is up, boys.
Oh no.
We
We haven't even gotten to the good stuff, like the
We haven't
really
gotten to the good
juicy
stuff.
stuff. Like I just the
that
preview.
Stuff, it's pretty mockable. It looks great. So, it is Russian.
Okay. The most Russian thing ever. And they also have.
It's treason.
Yeah. They also have, because this is a marketing campaign.
Here's the best comment.
Okay, is that AI? That looks like AI.
So they have several versions of these characters, and there's basically they have the regular versions for older kids, and then they have like Muppet Babies version for younger kids. So they have
baby. Russian just for you.
Exactly. So yeah,
but seriously, this is not looking like CGI anymore. This is looking like.
Yeah, I don't know.
So in the news, like I said, this is very recent. They've been showing up at some like Russian Comic-Cons, basically.
Oh wow.
Yep. And so yeah, you can see
Once
that picture.
again, why am I looking? I swear I'm looking at action figures.
I think they're trying to market it that way. There's actually, let me see here. They have a YouTube channel. So there's even some cosplayers who dress up. Here's our chick who's going to put the Zarya in a second. Lion the Zarya comic. So Russians have a superhero comic industry, or they're trying to have one. They're trying to make that a thing. So, we don't have to show too much more of that, but yeah, it's a thing.
Мы супергерои. Но у каждого из нас есть те, без кого мы бы ими не стали. Наши герои. Кто в годы Великой Отечественной войны не жалел ни сил, ни собственной жизни. Кто плечом к плечу встал на защиту общей Родины. Благодаря кому выросли мы и растут наши дети. Мы всегда будем помнить их подвиг и гордиться им. С Днем Победы!
Okay. So one thing to point out as well is how heavy, even with all the superhero stuff, as a function of propaganda, like they're still leaning really heavily into the kind of the motherland concept, into the Russian patriotism, and even Russian military as well, specifically.
I'm finding it really weird that they're showing a picture of the actual Soviet flag there. What the heck?
Well, because the thing is regardless of people's idea about communism of current Russians, like the Soviet Union was an inextricable part of their identity for 100 years, right? So you're not going to be able to get away from all of that, right?
They have I read a book on it.
Even if they want to get rid of a lot of it, that's still part of their history.
I read a book on it, and yeah, there are people. It's a contentious issue at times, but for example, there were a bunch of statues. I'm sure you've all seen the pictures, right? When the Soviet Union fell, there were a lot of statues torn down. After those statues were torn down, and more calmer heads, cooler heads started to kind of like emerge. There was this kind of idea of like, well, we're not just going to erase everything from our history, right? And there were even things that they were remembering, some people remembering that they even liked. And so there's this complicated idea of like, okay, we have this old statue of someone like Lenin. And so maybe we're not going to mulch the thing, but we're not going to have it in the middle of the square either. He gets like his own garden off to the side where we've taken the remains of that statue, perhaps. And
so clearly they're not Germans or Americans.
They're Russians. That's yeah. They have their own. They have their own very long history of dealing with their past.
Well, it's like a I can't remember what I was going to say. Never mind.
So, are you ready for the really rough stuff? Really interesting rough stuff for pure propaganda.
All right, bring on the IR.
Okay, here we go. So this is from Rybar, which is a Russian site.
It seems to be like an art collective, loosely speaking.
I think it's a blog though, because they don't just do art.
Right, but it seems like there's a team involved from the way they talk about themselves, and so the team is working together. No one person is getting the credit or blame.
All right, so let's pull this up, and this is of course straight from the BBC article. And this is their series, I think it's called Once Upon a Time, essentially, and they always kind of have a different kind of like subtitle for it. Okay, here's where the functions of propaganda start hitting, and they start hitting really, really, really like heavy.
Yeah, the subtitle is always either in or near where it takes place. They're like actual locations.
And there's about 20 of these things, and if anyone wants to hit me up on Twitter, I can get you a link to a bunch more of them. We chose like 5 or 6 of them to take a look at today. They're very fast reads. We're going to breeze through them, but there's definitely a lot to dig in here. And each one of them starts off with kind of a brief little kind of overview, a map, and kind of a preview of or overview of kind of the topic. They're all very topically related. And
this series, Once Upon a Time, is all based on the Russian-Ukrainian conflict.
Correct. Yeah.
Every one of these is specifically about some facet of the conflict.
Correct. So this particular comic is interesting because it deals with a aspect of combat of surrender, their enemy surrender, essentially. The way they choose to frame this is that new forces are being repeatedly sent to storm surrounding villages, sometimes at the expense of the main Ukrainian counteroffensive actions. Usually weakly motivated draftees were involved in these assaults, who were driven there under strict orders. The case of Kishevika is a good example of where this led. And so this comic briefly follows a Ukrainian soldier, and the Ukrainians always speak in yellow word balloons. And this one basically, this is where we really start to see the propaganda, because the Ukrainians are almost always portrayed in one of 2 ways. The Russians are always portrayed, obviously, as very heroic, self-sacrificial, willing to put their lives on the line, not only for themselves, but even their enemies. The Ukrainians are either portrayed as kind of heartless thugs, or the only good Ukrainians, essentially, portrayed in these comics are ones who are going to either surrender or betray their country. And the way this is framed repeatedly becomes very interesting to watch. But I want to hear from the panel. What did you guys think of this first entry? This is the first one I kind of threw at you guys. So this when you first started seeing this, what were the thoughts?
This one really didn't like hit me really much. It was
just felt like
just
a normal war comic.
Yeah, yeah. The only thing is, and like the character seemed really flat in it. I don't know that I really could care about most of the thing. Yeah, it was weird how much time was spent. I mean, like the story was almost entirely Ukrainians. And they were made. I mean, they weren't necessarily made to be unsympathetic.
But the sympathy came from a very particular direction.
Yeah.
You felt, because you look at the way this AI art, right? This guy looks sad, defeated, but he looks pitiable, and they're portraying him specifically in that fashion. And also, they're making him look not like a grotesque monster. Hey, this is someone you want to identify with. And this is again where the propaganda starts functioning on a couple of levels. So first off, you have the demoralization effect, okay, which is, look, your side is sad. Your side is not going to win. You're only going to lose. Look how pitiable you are. The other side of it is, look how much we're taking pity on you. And so if you surrender yourself, we're actually not going to treat you in a monstrous way. We are actually portraying you in the best light possible. So there's kind of this carrot and stick effect that you notice. The carrot is, of course, beating you over with the head. And these comics all do that with the unstoppable force of the Russians. You can't poke your head out of the foxhole without getting, torn to shreds. Don't you even dare. But if you do the right thing, then you're a good guy.
Yeah, but I think that's also exactly what made it feel like a normal war comic. Because our propaganda war comics were exactly the same way. Where it's like, oh no, the Americans will take pity on you if you do the right thing, according to what we consider the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Rhys, how do you think this stacks up against some of the war comics you may have read? Because I think that's a fair point.
And Captain America does not count.
No, I'm thinking about Sergeant Rock. Thinking about Our World at War stuff. Think the part of the issue, the difficulty that I had with these books was that I think that American war comics, because of the art style. I mean, those guys that were doing that were just such pros for so many of them that you're able to. There's more engagement with the characters. I think the other thing about it is the action
100%.
in these. A lot of things. The action in these is pretty. It's kind of storyboardy in a lot of them, rather than having the action, the comic as art form really lead you through the stuff.
Yeah, it's fair to bring up these are as Colin Lampling told us. No, it's Colin Lamping told us. This is definitely AI art. Painfully so in some cases. I was actually impressed how consistent it was when it was consistent. So actually did surprise me.
That's one thing. The first thing I looked for was the main characters and their how consistent they were with the main characters' faces. And they've definitely, whatever bot they're using for these is one that's got persistence of memory.
Well,
a little bit.
There's a couple of cases where it's
the
not.
The thing is the further along it goes, the better the modeling is.
There is one we'll get to later where the model was almost spot on the entire time, but that's also because it's the pure phenotype of a Russian woman.
Yeah.
It didn't have to try that hard.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing is, then there's the one with the little kid. We'll get to that one too, I'm sure.
But that one's all over the place.
Well, the first half of the book's almost consistent, and then by the second half of the book, it's a totally different. And like
He's like a little adult. He's like built like a little.
Sometimes,
man.
yeah.
I've just finally figured out what I've been looking at, and that is whoever's doing the translation, there is a single word bubble that they use.
Yep.
No matter, and they just keep flipping it or turning it upside down.
Oh yeah, that's very rudimentary.
The lettering is definitely like
It's the default like editor word bubble that just comes in that shape.
So before we move on from this one, I do want to point out one or a couple, just like two things from it, and then we can move on to the next example. But this panel here at the very bottom was cited in the BBC article as being significant. And I did want to point out, this is one of the few things I actually gleaned from the BBC article. When he says, I mean Nikolai, I've come to surrender, I'm tired. And that little shift there, right? So remember when back when I was used to calling it Kiev, and then suddenly it was Kyiv. It was just like, no, you have to say it this way, right? In this case, we have the opposite. We have him saying his Ukrainian name, and then he flips to saying his Russian pronunciation. This is kind of this. There's this moment of essentially like I wouldn't say subservience, but he's speaking. He's changing it into the correct translation in a way, at least for the Russians. What's interesting is that the Russians afterwards, and the BBC article doesn't mention this, but I believe that the Russians, once they've got him, and of course he turns on his fellow Ukrainians and shoots them, right? That's obviously complete treason, but he's a good guy because they were monsters and they were bad, and they start calling him, I think, Mykola again, I believe. Let me see if I can find it. They call him Koila, which I think is closer to what his Ukrainian name is. So there's something going on with how they're calling each other.
In one thing one of the only things I picked up from reading the one Russian novel that I made it through was that everybody's got like a million names. So
that could be the Russian version.
Yeah, just like there's like little nicknames that are tucked into their proper names, and
you've got like your family name.
You've got a familiar name, and you've got a name your friends call you, and you got a name your spouse or whatever.
But in the end, they call him his Russian name. The story of Nikolai. So he's been taken from Ukraine. He's basically been absorbed into Russia. He's not just defecting. He's essentially he's transforming. And so this function of the propaganda is like I said, it's operating at a much, I think, deeper level because of those connections. The story of Nikolai from Poltava is just one piece of the overall picture. Despite controversial aspects of the special military operation, there are people on the other side of the front line who are willing to fight for the right ideals and interests. Often, they only lack the opportunity to show their worth. So these comics are definitely framed with a narrative voice that kind of gives you a beginning of how you're supposed to interpret this and the end of how you're definitely supposed to interpret it. And so our Nikolai character, who's no longer Mykola, he is Nikolai. He has been transformed from a Ukrainian essentially into a Russian. He's turned on the Ukrainians. He shot his brothers in arms.
And that reinforces the Russian supposition that the Ukrainians are genuinely Russian to begin with. That's the idea, is that they're not a separate people. They're part of the same people, and that's why they need to be reunited. That's their position. So it's not that he's being returned to be, not that he's become a Russian, is that he's come home.
Returning, exactly. So but again, that's how they're framing that. That's how they've chosen to frame that. And so that's a significant thing to take a look at. All right, so our next example.
So, question though, who's meant to read this? Are these like leaflets being dropped into Ukraine? Because,
well, I think they're translating them into. There's Russian digitally. There's Russian versions. There's English versions. There's Chinese versions, and there's Arabian versions.
Yeah.
So. It's definitely made for the world, but I think it's also, according to the BBC article, is being made to target to Russian kids to demonstrate the worthiness of the cause.
They did their film train thing again. I don't know if you've heard of the film train back in the Soviet era. They basically took a train and they did filmmaking on the train, and it was a whole thing. And they, I think, showed the movie from the train or something. So they did like, I think, a multimedia train, and these comics, I think, were part of that. I think, or some of them were. So I think they're doing some local, outreach through that. So our next example is probably the most inflammatory in a lot of ways.
Get into that, there's one thing from the chat. Seeing a war comic on the Russo-Ukraine war feels oddly disturbing. And I think that's a really a poignant point to discuss here. But sure. Why? Why do we think? Because obviously we've seen World War II comics, we've seen Vietnam comics, we've seen
Iraq War ones. Yeah, there's been plenty of ones from Afghanistan and Iraq.
Yep.
As well.
And those are just accepted as part of our purview, right? I even read a comic about the Israeli
Palestine.
But back in 1947, right? That's set back in the original war, 1947. So those are just part of the milieu of comics, right? So what would it be about this war particularly that would seem offsetting? So just a little thought to put in there while we're going through the next set.
Definitely. No, good question to raise. Thank you, Colin, for raising that. This is the one that
is all over the place.
This one this one informed me about a couple interesting things. By the way, some of these comics deal with headlines. They're ripped from headlines, or they deal even they're headlines that deal with things today. So the Azov unit, which had been banned from receiving aid, in the news like this week, they overturned and they are now funding the Azov unit. It's a very controversial unit from Ukraine because of its links, purported links to ultranationalism and just flat out Nazism.
Yeah, some of them even been spotted with flags, with swastikas
right.
And stuff.
So this is obviously, if you're going to target something and you want an easy propaganda target, this one is good. This is going to come up, but it also
this
leads.
One gets so crazy. I love it.
Yeah. I also want to go back to the cover for just a second here.
Sure thing. Yeah.
It says "Adventures in Country 404," and is that on purpose?
I don't know.
Like the
This is country not found.
Not found. Yeah, 404 is an internet error. Means it's not found.
Yeah, I don't know.
Data not found. So, I just
it could be.
Or is that how in Russia you would spell 44?
I don't know what it means, but just my first thought was seeing this cover is like country not found.
Country not found. Rhys, to your earlier point, the idea that some Russians believe that Ukraine isn't a real country.
Yeah.
Well, hold on. Let me check something here. Hey Siri, how many countries are there in the world?
No. It's an etymological thing. Ukraine is referred to as country 404, claiming that Ukraine is an illegitimate state, which is why it's not found. That you could actually, a quick Google search will show this up.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
So So again, delegitimizing your enemy.
An internet thing?
Yeah, it's based on that, but it's
really?
on the error code. Yeah, and it's just saying that like the claims that Ukraine is an illegitimate state, so it's not found.
Yeah.
Okay.
That makes that. Yeah. That makes
this whole issue make more sense. But at the same thing, it's like that's like they're totally stealing from us, guys.
Russians would never steal something that we came up with ever. Not the atomic bomb, nothing.
We've been to the internet, and now they're using it to make fun of other people.
Yeah, like apparently the Ukrainian netizens have tried to like reclaim it. I don't know. I guess ironically, but I don't know how you reclaim. You're calling your own country an illegitimate state.
I wish they'd steal Taylor Swift, for crying out loud. Get that out of here.
Can I point out something very funny though? Because of the target, the Azov unit, they're able to say this. Since 2014, much has changed in Ukraine. Blatant nationalism has taken root in the minds of thousands, and yesterday's scoundrels and miscreants who have nothing sacred have been elevated to the rank of heroes. The targets of this propaganda, let that irony sit there for a second, are the most vulnerable layers, primarily children. So we have clearly a propaganda comic saying, you know what, I got a bone to pick with some propaganda. And that's one of the reasons why I had to show this one on stream, because that just death by irony.
So then on top of that, you have the BBC article doing the same thing, and now it's propagandaception.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's why we're doing this stream.
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody. That's exactly why we decided that this was the thing.
And now to the future Hitler Youth Camp.
Now you're making me want to see Ukrainian propaganda comics.
You know, I might have to dig some up if they have some available.
We'll have to figure out if that exists. And then we'll do Ukraine next month.
So here's our little child who looks like freaking Matt Damon.
And here he's and notice on the cover in here he's dirty blonde. Pay attention to that.
And he's part of this lovely little camp, but in reality, it is much darker than that.
And now his hair suddenly shock white.
We're talking about consistency too. Like, go back up to him, because he's putting glasses down. That's supposed to be the same kid.
Same kid, yeah. And no, that's
looks
fair.
like two utterly different people.
Yeah.
The previous one was much better at this.
Well, better in some ways. Because the propaganda hitting in some places, and this, like I said, this was probably the darkest one in a lot of ways.
No, I'm talking about purely in art, in the consistency of the AI art.
But it's like, well, that's it. Childhood's over. And then let's see. Some of this actually gets into some of the effects they use are actually really funny. So there's a night camping scene, and they have night forest sounds.
That was amazing. I love that.
Okay, I actually know why. And this Russian literature, a lot of the onomatopoeia in Russian is literally just the description of the sound, and it is the same thing. So if you were to translate it, you would just get an English description of the sound.
Interesting.
Gosh darn it, I was doing that as a joke.
Well, it's apparently a long history of
That's just how the Russian language works.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So this kid gets wrapped up in basically a cult where eventually they drink pig's blood. About as insane as you can get, and but it does lead to a very funny statement by our Matt Damon kid. Stupid camp, everyone here is crazy. Another night like this, I'll go crazy myself. If I get out alive, I'll become a vegetarian. So this story ends happily when he is sent off into the woods, and the entire camp gets blown to kingdom come by the Russians. So
I also just now realized that the kid is dressed like the Ukrainian flag.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I hadn't put that together until now.
Yeah. Good catch.
So the idea of local nationalism itself is rotten from within, and at the slightest encounter with reality and truth, the myth of militant Ukrainism dissipates completely.
So here's the thing about local nationalism being a myth, but every nation has a locale.
And loyalty to said locale often. So, yeah. Anyway, so like I said, we can see again from the propagandistic angle that why this why this topic was chosen, how it's being portrayed, and then of course, like, the story arc of it. The poor innocent Ukrainian boy is being, saved from these horrors by having that summer camp blown out of existence. But again, it's like this was a kids' camp, so the implication here, right, is that he got out alive, but the other kids didn't.
Well, and it specifically mentions like that that the kids camp is across the other side of the thing, and this is the Azog.
Oh,
okay, that's fair.
Also, I like how they try to make it look like just hazing, right? There's a part where they're torturing one of their initiates, and on his shirt it literally just says "rookie" in Russian.
Yeah. Oh, is that what that says?
Yeah, it just says "rookie."
Where does it say that it's the camp's on the other side?
It is.
I miss.
Or
that.
there's a thing where he's writing a letter or whatever.
Yeah, it's not on a shirt. It's like that board hanging from him, but it says rookie on it.
Oh, here we go. I think it's here now. That's what I call a real camp. Oleanic is full of children. Like wait till the morning when he's going to the Azog camp. So.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay, I guess that's.
Yeah, but if
I think I missed that.
I was going
detail.
to show you what I was talking about, but
yeah.
there's I think he's like basically naked. And he's got like a board hanging from his.
I see
shirt,
what you mean. Is it
from his neck? It's a little higher. They're like branding him.
the branding? Oh, that
Yeah,
one
yeah,
there.
and that literally just says rookie.
Rookie. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So they're making it look like it's hazing. It's like this is just part of a normal entry for them.
Gotcha. All right. So, like I said, that one was probably the darkest one in a lot of. Well, actually, can't really say it that way, but one of the darker ones.
Relatively.
That was the one that I felt that was the one that was the most uncomfortable. That one made me the most uncomfortable.
Oddly, that one made me laugh the most.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
It was the most ridiculous in terms of what it did. This next one was interesting. Did you know that diversity is also the strength of the Russians?
This one's weird, dude. Diversity is their strength.
Did you know that the Russians also have diversity as our strength? So basically in this one, it starts off in Cuba, and we've got our this little kid who's being picked on. He gets saved by a brave Cuban lad, and that Cuban lad even takes the fall when the window gets broken from their game. Fast forward years later, and that Cuban lad is joined up in the Ukrainian war.
Yeah,
and
he moved down to Russia to med school, and then he decided to stay and fight because he loves Russia.
So he is he's called they call him Che Guevara, and then he is he's matched up with his two diverse team squad mates, which they basically call him Jordan, like Michael Jordan, I'm assuming. And then I think Khan is the Chinese guy.
Yeah. Well, I think he's Mongolian, I think, but yeah.
We'll get Khan. That would make sense. But my dad is Russian. My mom is Russian too. I just happen to be born in Senegal. So here's our, like I said.
That's how that happens. That's why I look like a Plains Indian.
So these this band of diverse Russian brothers are fighting, and they meet up with the kid who was actually saved in the very, very beginning. Who
has signed on to the Ukrainian
correct
army through the UN, and with the promise of coming to America.
Exactly.
And so his goal is to come to America and enlist aid and some sort of force to invade Cuba and decommunize it.
Exactly.
I think I missed it. It might have been earlier, but in one of the panels, I think in this one, the dude looks exactly like Mr. Bean.
Yeah, there's a dude. Oh, I think that's in the next. I think that's in.
It might be the next one, but
yeah.
I remember one panel. The dude just looked almost exactly like Mr. Bean.
Yeah, I think that's in the dude with the one of the howitzer operators in the comic with the sniper.
Might be.
Yeah.
So here's the interesting thing, because here we get here's how the Ukrainians are often portrayed. They're cowards. They listen to the command. We're going forward now. If you see anyone near the house, shoot to kill. If they're ours, shoot them anyway. If they turn out to be our guys, we'll say the Russians put them there. No one will check. So again, the evil grins, the way that just the general way that the Ukrainians are portrayed.
Is that why their bubbles are yellow?
Yes.
Do they use yellow the same way we do?
No, it's just like the Ukrainian color. That's part of their flag.
Oh, true.
Yeah.
So Alberto, this is the kid who got saved in the beginning. And so these two guys are re-meeting each other. And then now we see how he was recruited from Cuba. and he's being handed American money in a very kind of like surreptitious way. And then he basically gives evil grin. He arrives in Ukraine, and he wants to go to the U.S. so that he can, as Rhys said, once I'm done here, I'll move to the States. Maybe we'll come to Cuba and build a proper democratic state. Grr. He, of course, is saved by his Mongolian comrade, and we have our diverse Russian team here. On the front lines, the saying "a friend in need is a friend indeed" takes on a new meaning. It is crucial to be with those you can rely on and always be ready to help a comrade. Yeah, it was tough for us today. Good thing those Ukrainian soldiers surrendered and warned us. So again, as a function of propaganda, the Ukrainians are constantly they're surrendering and betraying themselves. This is again part of the demoralization aspect, is that the way they're portrayed, there's never an inch of like, hey, you guys are actually competent, or you gained a foothold today. Really, it's mostly just you're just falling apart at the seams, and just an inch shy away from shooting each other. And I would say this is where I think they go even further than the American war comics, because I don't remember American war comics that portrayed the enemies this incompetently.
Yeah, no.
During World War II.
I don't
No,
I think
because it'd be better in our case to make them more competent, just more dastardly.
Right.
But but in this propaganda, there seems to be this intent to really just highlight how utterly like popping at the seams the enemy is.
That's how I believe a lot of North Korean propaganda is, in fact.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Not a surprise. All right, so but I thought this one was a noteworthy because, like I said, of the diversity is our strength aspect, which did, like I said, kind of crack me up. So the next one we've got, and we're about halfway through with them at this point. Nope, that's the wrong one. The next one I got to pull up is interesting because it is the topic they chose to take a look at. Hold on, where is it? 1 second. Might have skipped it here. It is, here we go. Okay. So this one is Women Fight Too.
Oh yeah, this is the one I was talking about. Now, the second I saw this, and I kept seeing her face over, I'm like, that is just what a Russian woman looks like. Like if you were to just boil it down to the pure phenotypes, because it looks like a Russian expat cosplayer that I've been following for many years. I'm like, I swear this is just exactly this person.
Here in Scott's Bluff's predominantly like Russo-German.
The nose is
right?
one of the big things.
Yeah, Scotts Bluff, Nebraska is predominantly Russo-German. So there is a lot of this chick in our town.
Yeah.
Oh, I got groceries from her the other day.
Yeah.
So this story is interesting because it, of course, like I said, it's about Masha, a sniper. I believe she is from Donbass, and that is the region that I believe kind of started, I think, the whole special military operation, because there had been a violence for years before the invasion even began. And so we get the story of Masha in this war-torn area, and she is a sniper, and we start off with her just killing a bunch of Ukrainians soldiers. But then we get to see her wonderful idyllic life with her Ken doll husband and Ken doll child. And she loves basketball, which I thought was an interesting touch. So, what'd y'all think of this one?
This was
the twist got me, because I thought it was setting it up that she lost her family and that's why she was doing her thing. At least that's what it felt like to me, with like all the whole dreary basketball and stuff like that. But then she goes home to her son afterwards.
Right. Well, and they do have the thing where it looks like she lost her husband.
Yeah.
But not her son. And I thought it was the whole family that must have got killed, because shortly after the scene, she's shooting the hoops, showing off, and then there's a bomb that goes off.
Yeah, so I thought she lost everything too, and then her son's still around.
I think this one was one of the reasons I like. I wanted to talk about this one. I think this one, from a storytelling perspective, was actually one of, if not the best, it was actually one of the best ones because it actually had a narrative.
Well, yeah, this is definitely one of the stronger ones as far as storytelling goes, and the narrative, even the breaks in the narrative to establish the stuff in the past, was done in a way that flowed well. The pacing was good.
So this is one of the first times where I went, oh, I was told a story. The previous ones, it was just so PSA that the storytelling just kind of seemed incidental, and this one actually had a narrative. In fact, the very end, I have to give credit where it's due. There's this moment where she's like pinned down by artillery fire, but she's gonna continue to stay to accomplish the mission, and they do this like flashback to her wedding, and I was like, ooh, did she just die? Like, is that like, did she, she's about to get like hit by artillery fire.
Oh, like the life flashing before her eyes.
Yeah.
And I
was like,
wondered about that too.
That was effective. I'm just saying, like, in terms of storytelling, that was actually well, so I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing that as they continue to make these, like, I think they're getting better at them. As we continue to go, I think they're actually like refining their craft.
Well, I mean, like when it comes down to that too, I mean, like we may not agree on the overall benefit of the work as propaganda, but I mean, if the people involved are honing their craft of storytelling, then they may have a way to use that later on. We're
also not aware of the level of feedback that they might be getting or the time in between each of these comics, right? Because they're going out to people. They might actually be getting feedback, and it's like fine-tuning their propaganda in that way.
Yep.
Yeah. So like I said, this one actually had an interesting narrative, and at the very end, she of course lives because again, it is propaganda. Can't really show her dying.
We go up to a couple pages here. Yeah, the sun is fine. But there's a up where it is that
goofy eyes.
Yeah, no, not that one. There we go. That's the one right there.
Ooh.
This page. Okay, so you got the headshot.
Yeah.
The bottom panel on this page.
Yeah.
The gunner.
Oh, you're right. That does look like Mr. Bean.
No, there was another one though. There was another panel like that was like dead on his face. That looked like Mr. Bean, and I can't remember.
Which
one it was that I saw it in.
Is it this one?
It might have been. Yeah, I think that's that one right there.
He looks a bit.
Mr. Bean right there.
They might have done that on purpose because again, they like to portray the Ukrainians as either fat or otherwise not a good phenotype, typically. So
that's such irony because in the UK, Mr. Bean is like a national treasure.
Right, but for this type of propaganda, he'd be a great AI model to use. And I do know from what Metal pointed out, they are using some celebrity reference for their AI models. That would
I remember I said in the I don't know if we'll see it. There was one character where I was like, I swear I know that actor.
Yeah, hopefully we do, because that one was my favorite. That story.
We'll get to that one shortly. Yeah. So I do like to end with the end narratives because they really show you like what the message you're trying to get from it. Masha could have done nothing and stay on the sidelines, but she made another decision, and her choice is clear to every resident of Donetsk. Love is the feeling that compels the people of Donbass to take up arms. Love for life, love for family, and of course, love for their homeland. So again, we get that kind of motherland, homeland idea for that one. But
I think in relation to that, I think Star has a really interesting comment. I think we're just so desperate for women who has a traditional heart, we'll take whatever we can get. I think that there's something to be said about that.
Oh my gosh, did a Russian propaganda comic just do a better job of telling a story of a female character than like the last 10 years of Hollywood?
All right, we're not gonna let's not open that can of words because you're probably right.
You don't want me to say that was a better Carol Danvers than Marvel Comics has been running for the last decade?
No, please stop. No.
Okay. Once upon a time in Spain. This is the one, boys.
Okay. This one is ripped from the headlines.
I love the name here because it's reminding me of Once Upon a Time in Mexico. And I want this to somehow be the sequel.
So this is not the sequel.
Or the prequel.
Before I show this one, I actually need to show what it's based on. just for the picture reference, because it's actually relevant for the comic. Okay, so in when was it? It was 2023. So last year, this guy, let me find, here we go. Here, I found the appropriate source. So this guy named Maxim Kuzminov defected to Ukraine by flying his helicopter. He was he was the pilot, and so he was the only one who could operate the aircraft. And he flew, I think, into Ukraine with his aircraft, and defected to the Ukrainian side. The interesting bit, several interesting bits. One bit is the fact that he had, I think, 2 other crew members on board at the time, like a navigator and someone else, and they were like, "What are you doing?" And but they couldn't stop him because he's the only one who can fly the darn thing. And when he lands, they tried to run and they were killed. So there were at least 2 people who were killed in this defection. And he was given a generous monetary compensation for his defection. And he was offered a choice of either, I think, living in Ukraine or relocating to the European Union. He chose to relocate. And a few months later, as you can see from this headline, he was shot dead and run over by a car afterwards, just to kind of rub it in. And mysteriously shot dead with a Russian gun. That was left at like it was clearly a Russian gun. I think the bullets was like a Markov or something. And so obviously everyone, looked at the Kremlin and said, "Hey, you do this?" And they said, "No, we didn't do that. But we basically, they did we didn't do it, but we clearly did it." So that's, like I said, something very, like, real event that happened. And the Spain is still investigating what happened.
How could they do that? Everybody knows that the Kremlins are just a bunch of alligators.
What?
The Donkey Kong.
Oh, the Kremlings.
Yeah, they're named
I
after
missed
the
that.
Kremlin. Yeah.
Okay, so that's why it's important. You need to know that bit of background material in order to fully understand what's going on in this comic. And that image of Maxim is important because of how he is specifically portrayed in this comic. So I can now we can take a look at a comic here. So and I think the opening narration here is also useful. In everyone's life, there is a choice between right and wrong, between difficult and easy, between black and white. We all make such choices every day, often without even realizing it. In war, this is greatly intensified. Every choice you can make can cost the lives of your comrades in arms. The majority of the Russian armed forces personnel protect their close people and even sacrifice their lives to save their fellow soldiers. Very rarely are there completely opposite cases when a person is willing to betray both country and friends for money. For example, the traitor pilot Maxim Kuzminov switched sides and hijacked an Mi-8 helicopter in the summer of 2023. This cost the lives of the navigator and the onboard technician. Kuzminov, however, showed no remorse for his actions, only cowardly hiding for a while. But the money he received was burning a hole in his pocket, and he set off for adventures, but not quite the ones he expected. So, real event in this comic, it basically just tells the story of how 2 assassins track him down and execute him. But the portrayal of Maxim, as you see, is completely the opposite, or very different from what he looks like in real life. They make him look like, and this is
Jackie
probably where.
Gleason.
Say who?
That's Jackie Gleason. I just thought about that.
Okay, I was gonna say he looks like he look as Cartoonicus mentioned. It's like I know that actor. But the photo reference for this shot here, because like it's kind of weird looking. She's like, "What kind of fun are we gonna have?" And it's like he's clearly got like something.
Some sort
Cocaine.
of container full of cocaine. But
And,
what kind of container is that?
Metal, do you have like at least a photo of what they referenced for this? Because I think you're right. I think they
I
ripped
could
that straight off.
grab a screenshot of it real quick, or
Yeah,
I can
yeah.
even just pull up the video on a still screen. Let me
Let's
go
do
grab
that.
I'm telling you, I know this actor, and more so, he always plays this part. The like sleazy rich guy, always in a smoking jacket.
Mrs. H says it's me from the past. And
Oh,
so-
are we gonna get a pickle out of this?
I don't know. Yeah, like Russian pickle.
Russian pickle.
Here, let me.
And
Star-
Star Storyteller's got. Oh,
pause
you.
it. It'll
I'll
actually
go ahead and
decide
bring it
to
up, or you can read it if you want, or I
pause.
can read it, or whatever. Masha's story is really tragic in regards to women vets that fought for the Russians in all their wars because they were treated so horribly and not honored or even punished for their service, which is a point. But yeah, so this
So this
Window,
actually
there we go.
you can tell that they're using like because I think they specifically.
oh, sorry, you already shared it.
Yeah, there we go.
I'm pretty
This
sure.
is
Yeah,
from is this Red Heat? John Belushi or Jim Belushi and Arnold Schwarzenegger.
We could probably find the
yes.
exact frame.
it's Red Heat. It's Red Heat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're clearly using AI.
That's a prosthetic leg in the movie.
It is. Yeah.
I had
Because
forgotten
he was
about that.
holding it in his fake leg. That's where he was.
Yeah,
hiding
yeah,
it,
yeah. And then this is definitely not a leg. It's
Exactly.
It's just a weird shaped container.
Which is what tells you even more that this is exactly what they pulled it from.
Well, so it makes me wonder if some of this is in fact
Cocaine 'em.
traced and
Yep.
there.
Well, I mean, yeah, this definitely, and I have a feeling like they're doing this on purpose, right? Like it's not. I don't think it's supposed to just like be a fake out. I think it's supposed to be like a callback.
That's true. That's true. That is fair. So
Now, this
R2.
okay. This is this part of the thing is so these two agents get hired by the Kremlin to hunt down this defector, right? But their adventures in the story are like something out of an Elmore Leonard comedy.
It's like a buddy cop thing they've got going on.
They're
yeah.
like they've been told they can be creative in hunting down this guy. So here they are trying on alternate identities, pretending to be other people of other races so that they can sneak through borders. But like they eventually end up discarding the plan to go in disguise and just try to go buy some fake identities.
So here's a question. Here's a question I got for you guys.
Yeah.
So this Rybar has contact with the Russian government, the people who make this. How do you think this is a complete fabrication, and they just hey, this guy got killed clearly by us, so we're just going to fictionalize it, or do you think that the Russians are cheeky enough to have actually passed along a couple, maybe not all, but a couple of actual details, and they're just kind of like wagging it in everyone's faces?
I don't know, because their whole thing is so wacky that I have a hard time believing they could be this. I mean, like, okay, I watched a movie.
I mean, so not like the individual vignettes, but like the general details of like, oh yeah, there was totally two guys, and this is the route they took.
Yeah, maybe that much. Maybe that much is real.
That's what I'm saying, like that kind of thing.
But like,
I think it's probably mostly apocryphal.
Okay. I don't know. I was just gonna say, I'm just curious what you guys felt about that.
So the there's a movie. It's got Jennifer Aniston and Mos Def. I can't remember. He changed his name to something, and I can't remember who else is even in this movie. But it's called The Life of Crime, and it's based on an Elmore Leonard novel called The Switch. And it's like the same plot as these guys, except instead of just being kidnappers, they're assassins. But it's basically the same plot. And it's just
with Tim Robbins.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. But it's just the wackiest, goofiest. Like, there's no way these guys didn't get like arrested for this kind of nonsense.
So they take a route through Turkey,
and they pick up fake names, and they want to be Romanian, but they can't be fake Romanian, because the fake Romanian IDs have already been sold. So they're fake Chechens, and they both hate Chechens, and And one of the guys is like, next time I get the IDs, Chechnyan, bah.
Next time I'll handle the documents. They had it. Yeah. So they even crack a joke. They even crack a joke at American guns, and that's where I think I'm the most offended in this particular comic, because they go to get their weapons to do their assassination, and I think that's a Smith Colt or Smith and Wesson. I think it's clearly an American gun. And the guy selling it to him is like, heaviness is good, heaviness is reliable. Even if it doesn't fire, you can always hit someone in the head with it. And they're like, oh no, actually, let's get a gun from someone who actually knows what they're doing. And so they hit up a gangbanger, and they just get.
It looks like Samuel L. Jackson.
And then, like I said,
which I want you to know, that model right there of the 9mm Glock goes for about like $650 on the market currently. So they're actually getting that at a steal.
So those are supposed
like
to be
$1,084.
Those are supposed to be Markovs, though. So I don't know what a Markov looks.
They might it's supposed to be Markovs, but they're using Glock 9mm as
the model gun for the.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that definitely doesn't look like, even on Google search, doesn't look like a Markov. So they purchase
they're getting
their
a
weapons.
better gun at a better rate, whether they know it or not.
They get their car, and then this ends with, again, the guy. They put the most evil grin on this guy's face, and when they sneak up behind him to do the deed, this is like the money shot essentially. And then they do what historically happened. I think the thing that struck me about this comic is, and this is where the modern propaganda hits, right? Because when we've read war comics before, there was gaps in time, right? Events, you either had to presage an event, or you had to basically react to it like months afterwards in order to get comics produced from a comic book perspective, from a multimedia perspective. And so because of that, you didn't get as much, like, I think, immediate commentary. And maybe in political cartoons, little one-shots you would. But here we have a comic that's produced, a little bit of entertainment value, clearly a propagandistic value, and yet we have a story about a human being's life that is being, like, this is not like removed from history by 50 years or even even a matter, I think, of, this is like happening like very close to the events. This person's like, barely, not even in the ground yet, essentially. And then, or I don't know the exact timeline, but it's happening very close to the event. And because of AI, you can do this. You can generate a comic tomorrow about a military battle that happened this evening, and you can release it like within hours. Like, that's the power of what the AI. I know we can joke about the AI models, and that's fair to do, but I think it is also interesting when it comes to a discussion of propaganda and rhetoric to consider the fact that the AI tool allows the spread of propaganda like that, which has a chilling impact when you think about the fact that this is a real person who doesn't look like this, who is dead. And then, of course, to even think about like the full implications of everything else resonating from that event, whatever side of the issue you're on. This is where, like, I think it really starts hitting home about the fact that we are reading comics, but we're also reading about real people and a war where real people are dying on a daily basis. And that's a sobering thing. And that's kind of where a Collins comment comes back up, which is the fact that this is unsettling. And that's fair. And I think it's fair to bring that up. This is unsettling to read. I still think it's an important thing to read and expose ourselves to, but it's also important to recognize this is unsettling, and for us to ask ourselves why it is, and to realize, and to really to be troubled by it. Sometimes it's good to be troubled by something you read. I am troubled by this. It's fair to say. I am troubled by this. And yeah. I don't know if anyone else had anything to add to that, but
Well, no, and I mean that's one of the things that I want to point out too. And we're talking about there's a separation between looking at it from a detached storytelling perspective, looking at it as a piece of art, propaganda, what have you, and realizing that this is based on a real person, right? And not in a way that's like, FDR talking to the Justice Society, sort of dealing with like a real person. I mean, there is a difference.
Yeah.
So.
The end cap to this one is also kind of, I think, unsettling as well. There are people who are capable of betrayal, as it has always been. There are those who won't hesitate to doom a comrade to death. Everything is possible if they promise enough money. Hoping that such a person will wake up to conscience I think, hoping that such a person will wake up to conscience is possible. I don't know if you meant to say possible or impossible. But what happens when a blatant case, everything falls into place, not in an abstract time, but with specific, even the makers of the comic were asking this question. Not in an abstract time, but with specific people. If the answers scare you, stop asking scary questions. What a Russian way of ending this. If the answers scare you, stop asking scary questions is how the Russians chose to end that particular comic. And I feel like we should probably just move on because that's they said it.
Also very much how like a Russian novel would definitely end too. It's like, we answered a very scary question for you throughout this novel. Don't ask any more, or else you'll have to read another novel that will probably mortify you through the course of it.
So we got, I think, one more, and this is the one that I think Rhys liked the most.
Oh, did we get a teehee?
If we get enough watchers on this stream, we might just start a new meme format.
Oh my gosh, this is amazing.
It is. It is.
I gotta share this here.
Oh heavens!
Did we get a pickle already?
No.
Sort of. It's in the same vein.
Is it like in Soviet Russian, like you get pickled? Like...
Yeah, sort of.
Sort of.
This is pretty close.
Okay.
Because in Soviet Russia, cucumbers pickle you. Also potato because vodka.
There we go. That's really well rendered. Good job.
Yeah, this is pretty good.
Also, it's the hammer and pickle instead of hammer and
oh, that's perfect. That's
yeah.
Oh,
that is genius.
That's what I didn't realize. That's what I was seeing.
Hammer and pickle. That's
hammer and pickle.
That wins the night right there. All right, so we're going to end with one of the more recent issues. Once Upon a Time near Chazivyar. I'm not pronouncing any of this correctly, so don't at me. And this one, I think, is probably the best written from a comedic timing angle. The Masha one, I think, had the most actual story arc. This one is the best constructed in terms of making things interesting and comedic. So again, they are leveling up their abilities and their craft over time, I think. Like I said, whether or not you consider that to be a threatening idea or concept is up to you. But I do have that shared for everyone's consideration. Though, like I said, there's actually more of these. But
I will say this. I hope that they are, in fact, leveling up their craft and not that the AI systems are being leveled up.
I think the writing, because I don't think they're being AI written. From a dialogue perspective, and this one had, like I said, comedic timing and how things were being structured. So I think that was the human fingerprints there. So
yeah, I do think the errors from before are just the differences of Russian grammar and machine translating.
I think so. Yeah, I agree. So this one, the opening is basically Sometimes the collective West offers other assistance as well, sending their military commanders to Ukraine. Most of them are officers of peacetime, accustomed to the comfort of an army that isn't at war. Training exercises, combat drills, shooting ranges, neatly dressed, healthy soldiers. This is their expertise. On the Ukrainian fronts, they encounter a somewhat different reality. Okay, so here we go. And this one immediately hits us with they're getting a new foreign general. And our characters are hoping that they get a Brit and not a Polish person. Apologies to any of you of Polish descent. There's going to be some Polish some Polish slander in this Russian comic. So they say the Brits are much better. They've got that funny accent, and the Russians usually don't target them with missiles. And then instantly, they're introduced to Dzień dobry, gentlemen. A Pole. Damn.
What this reminds me of is that Steven Universe meme.
Which one?
I think we're going to have to kill this guy, Steven.
Oh, well, that's basically the plot of the story. So we get two
That's exactly
aircraft.
how my dad would react.
Yeah, oh gosh.
Oh, God.
Two aircraft pilots, and they decide to throw some more slander. They talk about bombing and turning the entire area to glass to get this Polish general advisor. And Dima, that's not our method. Where's your humanity? We're not the IDF to level cities to the ground. So again, so just throwing all the slander at all the other countries. So there's your
wait, what's IDF?
That's the
Israeli Defense
Oh,
Force.
Israeli.
Yeah. So yeah, they're throwing shade at the Israelis for their war.
Darn it, Russia! What the heck?
Russia's like, no, we're much better at this.
Well, the Russians didn't invent the Palestinians, so I mean, I think it's probably fair that they, keep on that side of that conflict.
So then we got our Polish advisor. Of course, he's portrayed in this ugly, unflattering light. And the Ukrainians, of course, everything's leaking like a sieve. We've got a mole. The Polish guy says, no, you're just useless idiots. If there were Polish command everywhere, we'd already be in Moscow. It's not new for the Polish army to sit in the Kremlin. And then, of course, we get the kickback. Sure, it was when the people's militias chased Poles almost to Krakow. Right, in 1612, back then, those winged hussars flew away from us like roosters. So one thing that's interesting is how far back these people's slander and grudges and other things can go. Because, in America, we can only really go, we typically only go back to, 1800s, but these guys can go back almost to the Middle Ages.
Actually, it's really interesting to me because I'm part of a Facebook group about Shadiversity, a YouTube.
Most of us know Shadiversity.
They often talk about all kinds of things in the Middle Ages. One of the very common things to talk about, or even to just make memes about, is the whole winged hussars things. And I'm always seeing two completely different angles on that as to whether they won or lost, whether they were the heroes, the villains, the cowards, the heroes.
Right, yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh, wow, it's happening right in front of me here.
Exactly. So again, that shows you again another interesting angle on this as Americans that we don't. I'm not saying that we're not aware of any of it, but like it's something that we don't connect to as much because again, our country's younger, and like I said, these guys have
thousands.
Thousands, yeah. In some cases, a millennia of getting into each other's business.
Just ask a Finn what he thinks of a Swede.
There you go. But this also sets up a very interesting moment of the Polish advisor looking at the terrible state of the Ukrainian unit. And what's this guy doing here? Sir, this is our best aimer.
Okay, Top, tell me that background isn't just live action.
It could be a filter. I'm not sure. Wouldn't surprise me.
That's AI. It's all filter.
Yeah. But this is where the comedic timing started.
They forgot to put the filter on.
No, I think they did. If you zoom in more,
I could definitely see
it's
digital
there.
paint.
Not on the middle
stuff.
one, the top one.
Still is, I think.
This is
Anything.
I think it still is, but I think it's less obvious. But again, we have some of that comedic timing going on there, and then it's like, oh man, next you're gonna tell me that the driver is is lame, and they're like, oh well, he got his leg blown off, and of course he looks like a freaking hick. Meanwhile, our two main characters through this story are complaining and saying, you know what, we're so annoyed with this Polish guy. You know what we should do? Who wants to guess? We're gonna let chat decide this. So two Ukrainian soldiers decide they're just we're just really having a rough time with this Polish general. So in this comic, what does that lead them to? What is chat? What do you predict is the first thing that comes into these guys' heads for how to deal with their frustrating Polish commander? Is it to A, lodge a complaint, B, to prank the guy, maybe take him down a peg, or is it C, to do something else?
I'm gonna guess it's C.
Yeah.
Whatever it may be, but
let's see if chat can predict what these two guys are gonna do. I'll give it a second for them to catch up. Now this is so bad. Murder. Oh, so Fizz says it's gonna C is murder. So that's actually pretty close. C, of course, as we've seen in these comics, is what we should do is we should betray the Ukrainian army. Because that's all. Yeah, because that's always what you're supposed to do in these comics. Is you should always betray the Ukrainian army. And when you do it, when you betray the Ukrainians, when you betray the Ukrainians, you're a hero. But if you dare betray the Russians, we're going to hunt you down to the ends of the earth and run you over with a car after we've shot you 8 times. So that's what happens. They betray they betray the Ukrainian army, and then our jet pilots load up a crazy-looking missile, blow up our Polish advisor, and then the two traitors realize that they're both actually Russian spies. So they were both. Okay, does this make them traitors actually at all? Because they're not.
Realize.
They both realized they were both working for. They were both separate counterintelligence officers.
Each other was. You mean?
Yes,
each other. Yeah, and so you see their word bubbles turn from yellow to white.
Gotcha.
Right. So there.
This is, you say, the triple cross.
That means. Yeah, I was gonna say that means they didn't turn at all.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
The end cap for this one is very chilling. Real war is not a show. And a real soldier is almost never dressed to the nines and often doesn't look anything like the image on the poster. Moreover, in war, danger lurks everywhere. And this, combined with the excessive pride and self-assurance of invited specialists, leads them to a quick and sad end.
Mrs. H says they are healed of their vocal jaundice.
Yeah.
That's funny.
But the end message here from a propaganda angle is, don't you dare stick your nose in this war, outsiders, because if you do, we're going to get you.
Especially if you're Polish.
If you're British, we'll probably get you, but we'll be nicer about it. So but if you're Polish, we're going to blow you off the map.
Yeah. So this was I wouldn't say this was my favorite one, but this turn at the end where it's just like, where like, you're a Russian spy. No, you're a Russian spy. Ah, you got me.
We're both Russian spies.
No kiss.
I didn't pick it up at first when they were talking about chasing the flying hussars away from Moscow earlier in the story, because Ukraine has been part of Poland, part of Austria-Hungary, part of Russia, part of whatever, back and forth for its whole history. So I just figured that it was some sort of flashback to national identity, that they were trying to say these guys, even though they're Ukrainians, they really belong with Russia because that's where their real history lies. So when it turns out that they're actually both Russian spies, I was just like, oh, okay. So Star has a comment here on it. Says, actually, this explains it more. The Poles committed an insane amount of actual crimes against humanity against Russians. So that explains everything. Why they
They
were
all have.
extra. Since they're both actually Russian, why are they extra angry at the
Polish guy.
Yeah.
So, so I think that's the last one that we looked at for today. As a whole, what do you guys think of these propaganda? So I want to ask two questions. How do these rate as comics? How do these rate as propaganda?
So, how do they rate as comics? Some of them, it's a mixed bag, man. You know, I mean, like that one with the sniper, I thought was pretty good comics. This one's got some sharp writing. The Once Upon a Time in Spain, was, man, all over the map. It was the weirdest thing. The narrative did not flow well. The characters were doing zany things for no reason. It's like it was like Meme the comic, you know. I mean, it was not worse than Shax's Best Day Ever. It was better than that. But it was crazy, and that's like a lot of them were just like that, where they're just kind of all over the place.
So you're saying this could have gone up for an Eisner Award?
Yes.
Well, the bar is so low.
The bar was so low. Yeah.
Well, I will tell you this. I mean, the absolute worst of these is still better than that awful Star Trek comic.
That's what
yeah,
That's what
That's
he
what he
was
was talking about.
That's what the Shax's Best Day. Yeah,
that's
what
what I was talking about specifically. Yeah, definitely better.
Oh gosh, that's I think the darkest realization of the night.
Yeah, that even the horrifying one about the real event is still better than a really bad Star Trek comic.
Because we're Ryan North, right? Yeah, Ryan
All
North
of
is
these are possibly better propaganda comics than that is.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
The Azov comic about fascism was actually a better propaganda against Nazism than Shax's Best Day.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
by far.
For sure. Absolutely.
Gosh, that's no, you're right. You're right, but I
think that's the lesson of this entire episode.
Is that the chilling part?
Yes, that chills you to the bone. That's wow. Okay.
That's today's moral.
Yeah. So yeah.
F
there you
me.
go. Ryan
Okay.
North, you're on notice, dude. You're about to be replaced by a Russian robot.
AI.
A single Russian man with a machine.
If you asked me which one I needed, if you asked me to reread a terrible comic, I would rather reread Once Upon a Time, any of these, than reread Ryan North's work. That is wow, that's dire.
With the exception of dinosaur comics, I still like dinosaur.
Sure,
comics.
no, that's fair. That's fine. Yeah. I'm just like his other writing. I'm just like, holy crap, that's bad. Okay, all right. Metal, what do you think? How do these rate as comics or and propaganda?
So mid, maybe somewhere around there. Even the better ones, like at least like the sniper one, there at least some attempt at rerunning the machine over and over again and cropping the panels to try to get some type of art direction. But a lot of these, like it is carried by the writing. There's like very little to no art direction in a lot of it. And I mean, even with AI, you could rerun the prompt over and over again until you get something that is close to what you're looking for. And some of it just looks like, okay, this works okay enough. We're just going to slap it in. So I'd say, I don't know, 4.5 out of 10 for the best of them, but they're not the worst things I've ever seen.
Yeah. And like, not to step in their time there, but I really do want to draw a line of distinction between the visual artistry in these, and
actual
the
direction
story
of the
artistry in these, right? The visual artistry is mostly, I mean,
That's the chilling thing
more
for
than
me,
adequate from an
is that
illustrative
a lot of
perspective.
it has
from
more
an illustrative perspective is more than adequate, but from a comics perspective, right? Because
Yeah, and like
that's one of the-
storytelling and flowing from panel to panel and matching with like how the words are drawing the eyes and stuff. It's like 4.5.
and even as the later comics where you can see that that their machine is getting better at remembering the characters, right? That's great, but like there's still the way the backgrounds flow together or don't flow together, and the way there's the shift change and the way negative space is not even used,
Yeah.
right? It's like if you're judging it as comics, as story, some of these I think are not the worst thing, but as comic,
I read these like journals, like somebody was writing from their perspective what was happening in like a pulp form. I'd probably like these a lot more because some of the stories are kind of entertaining. They're very personal, but yeah, judging it from a comic, I think the highest one I can give is like a 4.5. But if we're judging by propaganda, which was your other question,
Right.
I might actually have to give it higher. I might give like the sniper one, I might give like an 8 out of 10 as propaganda. And even like the lowest one, I might only give like a 5. Like I think they're probably between 5 and 8 as far as like functional propaganda goes.
That's an interesting. I want to pick your brain more on that in a second. So let's let that percolate for a minute. There are two things I wanted to mention. First off, I reinforce all your points, Rhys and Metal, on the art. These are not the easiest things to read because they're a jumble of AI stuff. The flow of panel to panel is not very well handled. That's just because of the tools. That's a consequence of the tools they're using. Cartoonicus, you had something that you wanted to. You said that was chilling to you.
Yeah, for me, because you can judge the art by the storytelling ability. You can judge the art by comics, but you can also judge the art just by a single image and its ability as an illustration. There are actually a lot of these comics and a lot of parts of them. There are exceptions, but I often feel like they're way better than they have any right to be visually. And that really ticks me off as someone who is so anti-AI in so many ways.
I was surprised at how well. I was surprised that being AI trash in a way, that how well they held up, even conceding that they're 4s. The fact that they were consistently hitting 4 did bother me.
Yeah, and I can definitely see places where somebody went into some type of editor like Photoshop or Clip Studio, and they adjusted some of the hues and some of the shadows and stuff to try to make it match a little bit more. So this wasn't completely just the machine. You can see that there was some effort in places, but it was still quick effort. It was like somebody who this isn't like their job to paint these type of pictures or anything.
Gotcha. Good points. For me, I think I agree. I think as comics, I wouldn't rate them very highly. I think as propaganda, I think for the Russian side, I think they're fairly effective. I think
that's when I'm trying to look at it is from like a Russian perspective.
I think from the opposing side, for us, I think the effectiveness begins to drop, except for. I'll give you one exception that is actually effective no matter what, and it's Once Upon a Time in Spain. Once Upon a Time in Spain is probably the most effective piece of propaganda for both the side that it's on and the opponent, and I'll explain why. So if you are on the Russian side of the conflict, it's excellent propaganda because it's reinforced by the fact that the real life outcome, they got their guy. If you are on the opposing side, it's kind of terrifying because the comic reinforces the fact that they got this guy in Spain. And it's like, and by the way,
isn't it also terrifying on the Russian side too? Because it's don't you dare step out of line.
Well, that also makes it more effective propaganda too. And the Ukrainians actually, in the aftermath of this event, actually admitted this. They said, wow, this is gonna make it way harder for people to defect because they got him in Spain. So that comic is, I think, top shelf, top tier propaganda. but it's propaganda that's really reinforced by the reality of the situation. So it's that's an interesting one, I think, for me, because it's like whether you were pro-Russian or anti-Russian, that one's kind of very chilling on all angles. And was it stop asking scary questions? Shut up, you. That's basically the message. So yeah, I think it kind of runs the gamut of being, not super effective propaganda to being like really, really effective. So comics, obviously, like I said, it's middling at best. But I think at the end of the day, it's really fascinating to compare this to the BBC portrayal of them. Because the BBC basically ran a hit piece, which is it's just another kind of propaganda. They ran a hit piece on these comics. And so it's just, like I said, propagandaception. I don't know. It's an interesting bit of an interesting exploration. Rhys, did you have any other thoughts on the effectiveness of the propaganda angle?
I guess my part of the thing is the tone. At the beginning of the show, I said I think that it's ineffective in convincing anybody who's not already on the Russian side to continue to be. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's got this wildly fluctuating tone where things are serious and then they're not serious, and the Russians don't seem they seem super effective, but they don't always seem like really good. There's no real discussion of the issues as they stand. There's just the presumptions, which I mean that's part of propaganda anyway. But
there's no nuance to it.
Yeah, there's no nuance to it. It's one of those things where, if you're already inclined to buy the 404 mentality, then I think it may seem more convincing. But like you said about once upon a time in Spain, where both sides of the discussion come out looking bad, right? And I think that's actually kind of the same, frankly, for maybe not so much the one before that with the Burger King Kids Club of Russia.
Oh, the Azov Brigade.
Yeah. Well, no, not that one. That one's.
Oh, you mean the diversity is
diversity
our strength
one? Yeah. The one at the camp, that's pretty straightforward. That's pretty effective, except that the art style is super distracting.
So, in terms of because Rhys, if I could just unpack that a little bit, though. So, in propaganda, right, you have that idea of you're on our side. You're not on our side, but we would like you to be on our side. But then there's also that other function, which is if you're not on our side, we would like to demoralize or scare you. How effective is it at doing either the demoralization or the intimidation part? Because that's clearly part of the intended. That's part of the intention for some of these pieces. If you're not on our side, we don't necessarily want to convince you to join our side.
Right.
We definitely want to demoralize and intimidate you into being less likely to cross us.
Well,
Okay.
again, I'm asking that question of how are they going to get people to read this?
Well, I don't know.
We read it.
Yeah, I could get a BBC article published.
I mean, they just distribute it, right? Like it's easily distributed online, but they could have printed copies of these somewhere. But for the most part, people read things on their phone. A lot of these at the very end, there's a QR code that you can scan.
Yeah, they have a Telegram. They have a Telegram.
Yeah, there's a Telegram and everything. Which I mean, the servers are they still hosted in Russia? They were at one point. But yeah, it's not hard for them to distribute this to people.
Yeah. So
right, but imagine I'm a Ukrainian. I want to go read Russian propaganda comics.
Go to Telegram.
Right.
Pull up Rybar. Rybar has it just on their site.
Well, why would I want to? Right. How are they getting people to read this?
I don't know if
read this comic
they wouldn't
so that we can
mind
scare you.
if the opposition read it, but that's clearly not the main goal.
I
The main goal is
don't
their
know the
people.
distribution method, but I
Yeah.
do know that it's easily disseminated. So there is that.
And so, like, I mean, I guess, like, when it comes to that, how effective is the propaganda to, an outsider? I think there's two sides you got to look at, right? So, as an American, it really seems like, okay, I'm going to be crass about this, but you ever know that guy who's like you'd be working with at McDonald's or whatever, and would just be always talking about like some chick he banged, and you're like, dude, you've never even seen a tit, right? It kind of feels like that to me, where it's just like, yeah, okay, sure, man, that's really great. You feel that way about yourself. I hope you have a really great time there, Russia.
Gotcha.
And so as an American, that's kind of how it makes me feel, like that. As propaganda, like this does not impress me that the Russians are overwhelmingly skilled fighters, because they have to talk about it instead of just taking care of it.
What about assassins, though? Because we've had people like the guy who got polonium poisoning. They're much better.
Yeah. I mean, obviously the war's still going on, so they've got some sort of skill with it. But like the over gotcha. Like sizes, they're in the comics. The Russian force is unstoppable.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They're unstoppable. They don't take casualties. They're just, Arnold Schwarzenegger taking care of business. Yeah. And I don't that and that's the part. So it's not even that, like, in the real world you look and like, they're definitely, the war's still going on for reasons, right?
Right.
And there's been lots of reasons that it should have not been. But
and I think this is why the sniper one was the most effective to me personally. And I'm even looking at something that Star Storyteller says. It's like, but really, there are some folks who are just tired of the war and want to get on with their lives in Russia. When I read that story, and it's some of the through line of how they're trying to frame their efforts, is that in some ways they are a force of justice upon this, and that like injustice was done by the other side. Like this part of like the whole, it's an invalid state, right? But in counterance, right, there are attacks and stuff. It's like, we're the side that is just, and if you want to be able to live your life, we need to succeed for justice to prevail. It's sort of like the through line that I'm getting here. And the Once Upon a Time in Marinka is the one that sells that the most to me, because she loses the husband and fights and comes back home to the kid, and that's something that like even your everyday Russian could kind of get behind.
No, that's a good point. And thank you, Star, and everyone else who has contributed there in the chat. Like I said, this is again, we've acknowledged this once. We've acknowledged it again, that this is an uncomfortable topic, and we're tackling it with full knowledge of how it's an uncomfortable thing. And in fact, being uncomfortable as we read these is, I think, a fair takeaway. So like I said, not trying to glorify anything ugly. War is ugly, and like I said,
and I mean, there might be some people in Ukraine that they're trying to reach, because one thing that we have to remember at the start of this too is that there is a large population of ethnic Russians that live in the Ukraine area.
Oh no, I definitely think they're trying to reach with the with the Ukrainians. I think they're so much of these comics showing, hey, be a hero, betray these evil monsters that you work for.
They're specifically targeting like the ethnic Russian people who have lived on that land for a long time. It's like, you're actually one of us, and we're the ones you should be on.
Defections happen, like as one of these comics address. So like if they can prompt a defection, it has consequences.
Well, they don't have to actually. There have been a ton of people near the border who have been running over to Russia because, let's just say, the Ukrainian government has not exactly treated their own people the greatest. And I won't get into details, or else end up, getting Rhys kicked from YouTube. But
Well, okay, like
There's a lot of it.
I didn't want to open the can of all those
Right.
infinite can of worms there. But again, to keep it focused on the comics in particular, they're definitely being targeted at Ukraine in some fashion. I think that so I think part of the intended audience is that on some level. How they're being distributed, I don't know. But I actually did a Google search. And so to give the other side of it, I think we can find some Ukrainian propaganda war comics as well.
Nice.
And maybe we can take a look at that, and then
we have to do a part 2 now.
Well, we kind of have to. We did the Russian side.
This
so
was
I think
fun. I want to see the other side.
I'm kind of curious too. See, the issue.
Also, I want to answer Fizz real quick. He asks, "Are Ukrainians and Russians the same ethnicity?" It's complicated. It's mixed. There's a few different ethnicities there. Yeah, it's got a very mixed history of different people crossing that area and living there at different points in time.
Yeah, it's like asking if the Poles are Slavic. It's yes and no. It's super complicated. Eastern Europe is very, very complicated.
So it kind of just shows what a joke actual ethnicity really is in the end. We're all just people.
Yeah. Oh, definitely that's the case. But I mean, even like language culture is a factor in some of that kind of stuff. But it's really
just lineages at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. And they've been and the Ukrainians have been independent. They've been subject to Poland. They've been subject to Austria-Hungary. They've been subject to Russia. They've been subject to the Huns. Before that,
yeah.
So if you want to,
it's swapped hands tons.
Turks.
Yep.
You want to share me one more time as a preview for whenever we follow this up. I did just find on Kindle Unlimited. So this is, I think, the first. It claims to be the first Ukrainian comic book about war, Russia versus Ukraine, and so here we go. Yes, the Ukrainians have their own war comics. So
I mean, at least it looks like somebody drew this, as bad as it is.
So we can take a look at that. So yes, we will get we can get the other side of the story here, which I think would be a good companion to what we've looked at here. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So Chad asked us. We can do that, and then we'll have both sides of that. That'll be an interesting
week. Next week we will not be doing Ukrainian comics. We're going to give us we're going to take some break away from
Soviet Superman.
Next week we're going to do Superman.
All right.
How's Brainiac? We're going to start on that.
That'll give me some time to do a little more research and find some more of these.
That'll be.
Well, actually, remember we once suggested that I can't remember the name of the writer of that comic, but that he's actually listening in on our podcasts and changing the story as he goes.
Williamson,
if we run down to like Soviet Superman, then we'll know.
That's all right.
Red Sun.
Yeah.
Finds a way to work him in.
Alrighty.
This is a true statement.
Well, I think that's a show. I think we covered the topic pretty well. I hope you guys enjoyed that.
There we go. And that's the thing is, so next week we're back on the Superman, and then we'll probably talk Ukraine after that. At some point, I'm going to have Mike Barron back on to talk about the Badger. We need to set that up, but that'll probably be July at this point. So, but yeah, we got a few things out there, and my brain just died. I think that's the end of the show.
Keep reading comics.
Keep reading.
No, you gotta go proper Russian.
Keep reading comics.
It's like До свидания, вы красивые люди.
No. In Soviet Russia, comics read you.
That's the one. Bye.